Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video, and I've got a new psychedelic light here, which was a gift from a friend of mine. I thought I'd try it out, and very pretty it is too. So I hope it doesn't distract you too much from the records. I'm going to do another another instalment of recent spins, where I just try and catch you up with what I've been listening to, because I'm sure you're all desperate to know. Yeah, let's get right on in there. So, bit of a mixture of stuff. Got 6 records to show, I think, so let's get started. So firstly, I went back and had a little listen to this album. This is The Sensual World by Kate Bush from 1989. This is an album that I've struggled with over the years. I must admit, I'm probably more of a fan of early Kate Bush. You know, I really love her first 3 albums. I do like The Dreaming, although it's very experimental. I do like Hounds of Love, although not as much as other people. This one I've always struggled with a little bit, but it's kind of started to gel with me a little bit. I've been streaming it as well, actually, as well as playing the record. This is 1989, and it does have a bit of an 80s production going on. It's quite interesting. It's called The Sensual World, but musically, the music is not all that sensual. Her voice is, you know, very, very sensual. Obviously, it's Kate Bush, but there's a definite sort of clatter to the sound, a bit of a sort of heavy, rather distressing drum sound, I've always thought. But what I do quite like about this record is the way she weaves in the kind of, I suppose it's Celtic, sorry Headley, Celtic kind of pipes and sort of, you know, folky kind of sounds. And the music is, as usual, very ethereal. I suppose with this record, most of the songs are not very hooky, but that kind of works in its favour. You know, the album after this one, which is The Red Shoes, she went a bit too hooky maybe. This one is definitely less hooky. You know, like a track like The Fog, for example, the tune, you have to really work at that to kind of hear how the melody works. It's not very immediate, but some beautiful tracks. I mean, the title track is wonderful. Reaching Out is just an incredible song with an amazing lyric, and Deeper Understanding at the start of side 2. You know, I mean, it's a great album, no question about it. It's just, over the years, it's not one that has particularly been close to my heart, but I just really enjoyed going back to it. So yeah, there we go. The Sensual World, why not? And there's a sort of slight link between that one and this one, because Kate Bush, who was a big fan of this artist, is a big fan of his. This is Captain Beefart and the Spotlight Kid, and this is an original pressing which I bought recently from my friend Pete, who was flogging me a load of his records. This album, I've got a repress of this, which came out in a Captain Beefheart box set, which came out maybe about 5 years ago now, but it was really nice to get an early pressing of it. This album came out, I'm not sure what the date of it was, maybe 74, something like that. And Captain Beefheart's interesting because his first album, Safe as Milk, is kind of a bit of a blues rock, you know, garage psych type of thing, and then he immediately went off in the deep end with Trackmaster Replica and Lit My Decals Baby, and then he started to retreat from that. I think really because of record company wanting him to try and, you know, make himself a bit more accessible. So he did this album, and then I think he did Clear Spot after that, which was produced by Ted Templeman, and then he went off and did, you know, things like this one, which I haven't actually listened to recently, but that's Blue Jeans and Moonbeams, which was, you know, definitely too commercial. This one I think is a really interesting album because, you know, it is still Captain Beefheart. Essentially it's a blues album. It's a really strange, freaky blues album. It doesn't have all that kind of very overt, clattery, bangy stuff that was going on at Trackmaster Replica. It basically sounds like Van Morrison on acid, maybe early Van Morrison on acid. But it's got some tremendous stuff on it and great musicianship. The first track, I'm Going to Booglerize You Baby, with an amazing slide riff, absolutely incredible. White Jam, the second track, is a bit of almost a ballad really, with a bit of vibraphone going on. You know, he had that vibraphone side, which I always found really endearing. That came through quite a lot in later albums like Shiny Beast, Backchain Puller, you know, quite a lot of vibraphones on there, quite sort of childlike. Blabber and Smoke is another great heavy kind of blues track. When It Blows It Stacks is brilliant. Alice in Blunderland at the end of side 1 is a really great instrumental track. Love it. Click Clack on side 2 as well is a really, really great Beefart track. I think this is a really good album. It was self-produced, I think. Yeah, it was produced and arranged by Don Van Vliet. On the next album, which was Clear Spot, I think they got Ted Templeman in then. That was more kind of, heading into more of a mainstream direction. But this album, I think, caught him at a really interesting juncture, and I do think it's a really, really great album, actually. So really great to get that into the collection. I'm not going to get all the labels and the inners out, because that's more of a vinyl finds type thing rather than this. But yeah, great to hear that again. Right, this one, a record, I showed this in my second ever vinyl finds video back in 2016, and at the time it was a brand new record, and I picked it up, I bought it because I had just been to see them live, I think. This is Wire and Nocturnal Koreans. Now Wire have got a very, very long tangled history. Most people don't get much further than the first album, Pink Flag, which came out in 1977. But then you got Chairs Missing after that, and then 154. That was kind of in their early days when they were definitely a punk band, post-punk. They were sort of post-punk, really, right at the outset of punk, very ahead of their time. An art school band, really. But then they broke up, and then they reformed in the 80s as this more kind of 80s dream pop kind of thing, and then they went a bit industrial, split up again, and then Bruce Gilbert left the band, and then they reformed in, I think, probably in the noughties, and it's Colin Newman still from the original lineup, Graham Lewis on bass and vocals still, Robert Gray, that's Robert Go to Bed on drums still, and then on this album Matthew Sims is the guitarist replacing V.C. Gilbert. And this incarnation of Wire, which has been going on now for quite a few years, a long time actually, this must have been about 2016, like I said, and I saw the band live at around this time, and this is kind of blends some of the 80s dream pop sound with the sort of harder guitar sound which they had back in the late 70s, and maybe a little hint of industrial coming through there, but it's quite sort of dreamy, quite trippy, and it's quite a short album. There's only 4 songs per side, but the songs are all really strange. They all bleed into each other. It's hard to sort of tell one from the other. Colin Newman shares the lead vocals with Graham Lewis. They take it in turns, although it is mainly Colin. But yeah, a really, really, really good record. Most of the albums that they've made since they reformed in the noughties I've got on CD. This is the only one that I picked up on vinyl, but a really, really interesting record. Great sound, interesting songs, and just a great British band, I think. Quite underrated, undervalued. So there we go, Wire and Nocturnal Koreans. Right, a complete contrast. This one, just a record that I sort of had on the shelf, and it was in the back of my mind as being a record that I bought at the time, probably about 3 or 4 years ago. Showed it on the VC. Played it a little bit, but didn't really get into it massively. So I thought, right, I pulled it off the shelf. This is Grace Jones and her album Inside Story, which I think comes from about 1989, something like that. This is a Spanish copy, and I hadn't remembered when I pulled it out and started listening to it. I'd forgotten that this was done in collaboration with Bruce Woolley, who I think had worked on some of the other stuff that she'd done. I'm fairly certain he had a hand in the Slave to the Rhythm stuff, because Bruce Woolley is a friend of Trevor Horn, and it was Bruce Woolley who kind of co-wrote Video Killed the Radio Star back in the day, and then he had a kind of flop single with it with his band The Camera Club, and then Trevor Horn went off with Jeff Downes and had the big hit, and Bruce Woolley never really made it as a kind of big solo star, but he did go on to write for other people, including Grace Jones. And he's a good songwriter. He's a really good, interesting, left of field pop songwriter. He is definitely pop, he's not rock. This album, it's okay, it's all right in places. It's a little bit soulless 80s, I think. It doesn't quite have what the classic Grace Jones records have got. There's Great Island Records, Nightclubbing, and where she was working with Sly and Robbie, and there was a very particular kind of groove going on those records, and a very particular kind of ambience and a musicality. This is definitely more of an 80s record. You've got the sort of the presets on the synths. It's not terrible in that respect, but it is definitely an 80s record. A couple of really nice tracks. Chan Hitchhikes to Shanghai on side 1. I'd be surprised if that wasn't a single, because that's a really catchy song. And then on side 2, what was the song I really liked on side 2? It might have been Scary But Fun. And it's produced by Nile Rodgers, this record. So Bruce Woolley writing, Nile Rodgers producing, Grace Jones singing. She does a good job. She's being Grace Jones, you know. She's very consistent as a vocalist, and she does a good job on that record. It's not, I don't think it's kind of vintage Grace Jones, but it's definitely enjoyable, and it's not one that I'll be getting rid of or anything like that. So that was nice. 2 more. This next one, an album which I first got into it back in, it would have been probably about 15 years ago now. I really liked it. I got it on CD, and I just thought it was fantastic. In more recent times, I've heard a couple of people saying that maybe it's overrated. I think maybe Jeff at Calico Silver had said he thought this album was a bit overrated. This is Lou Reed and the Blue Mask. I don't know. I mean, what's overrated, underrated? These things are so complicated. I'll leave that to Andy Edwards to decide, I think. But this album, which came out in the 80s, is it going to give me a date? No, it's not. Probably sort of mid to late 80s. Oh no, actually 81. I never get it right, do I? Great band. Robert Quine on guitars, really crunchy guitars. Fernando Saunders on bass. Duane Perry on drums. Very tight, controlled sound. Beautiful production. Lou's voice is just really kind of close mic'd, you know, well recorded. A lot of great energy on this record, dark energy actually, you know, tracks like The Gun on side 1, Waves of Fear on side 2, you know, quite sort of filmic, quite dark, just, you know, Lou Reed. The first track actually is beautiful, My House, which sort of is a song about his just him living at home with his wife in his beautiful house, which he's decided is haunted by the ghost of Delmore Schwartz, who was his old friend and sort of mentor, really, back in the 60s. Delmore Schwartz was an American poet and novelist. Really interesting song, actually. The Blue Mask at the end of side 1 is a great track. I've always liked The Heroine on side 2, The Heroine, which is a strange song. I assume it's about heroin, but it's couched in a kind of metaphorical story about a baby on a boat. And it's just Lou playing an electric guitar, not plugged into an amp. It's got a really interesting, intimate kind of sound to it. When I listened to it this time, I did think to myself, yeah, maybe not kind of like top Lou Reed, you know, not Berlin, not New York, not Transformer, but if you take those out of the picture, you know, it's kind of up there among his better albums, I'd say, and you know, I think a bit of a milestone for him. So yeah, Lou Reed and The Blue Mask. And we'll finish with one that I pulled out last night, really in response to watching Rob Ison's most recent Vinyl Finds video, where he showed this record. He picked it up at the Moseley Record Fair, and I remembered that I had it, so I went to dig out my copy of it. This is Green by Steve Hillage, and goes well with the light, doesn't it? This actually is a limited edition green vinyl edition, which I'll quickly show you. This came out in 1979, I think. I've got more Steve Hillage records than I thought. I thought I only had this one and one other, but I've got 4. This one is 1979, I think, and 78 on Virgin. Very ahead of his time, I would say. On this record, you've got these synthesizers. It's the ARP and the EMS, and they really sound like a lot of 90s dance music, particularly that kind of Eat Static, kind of Ozrix Tentacles kind of sound. It's difficult to describe it, but you know it instantly when you hear it. It's very sequenced, it's very hypnotic, and really it sounds like dance music. Obviously, you know, Steve Hillage, a British progressive rock artist, really, who was very forward thinking and later on went into more of a kind of electronic direction. Bit of an eco warrior. There's definitely a very strong eco theme coming through on this record, you know, see nature. It's very sort of, you know, 1968, going off into the hills to watch the UFOs, you know, UFO spotting. It's just got that kind of psyche, kind of back to nature thing, a combination of you know, nature, but also that kind of sci-fi thing and the eco thing. A really, really good album. A couple of really good instrumental cuts. Ley Lines to Glassdom on side 2. It sounds a bit like a Bebop Deluxe song, doesn't it? It sounds a bit Bill Nelson-ish. And then a really great track towards the end, Activation Meditation and the glorious Om riff. Yeah, really, really great album, actually. It was one that I sort of hadn't thought about for a long time, and I just really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was great fun. Really great headphone album. So there we go, Steve Hillage, Green on Green. So yeah, there we go. That'll do for now. 6 records. That's enough, isn't it, really? So anyway, hope you enjoyed that instalment. Hope you enjoyed the Trippy Light, and I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.